also cause for great concern is the understanding we now have that this is a progressive disorder, that once you're infected, you have an increased risk, probably for the rest of your life, of contracting some serious illness. So that I think by no means are we overreacting to this problem.
Dr. Hazeltine here in New York from Harvard, and Dr. Curran in Atlanta, thank you very much for being with us tonight. In most cases, it takes years to diagnose an actual case of AIDS. After infection, sometimes as long as 5 years. A majority of those who are infected don't know it. They have no symptoms. They never will. A question: can AIDS be cured? Well, treatment remains elusive. There is no vaccine yet on the horizon. Assuming the worst, some experts say that among Americans now infected, 100,000 could die. Modern medicine beat polio, the toxic shock syndrome, and Legionnaire's disease. But as NBC News science correspondent Robert Bazell makes clear now, AIDS seems to be something else. To understand the search for a cure, you first have to understand the disease.
Victims of AIDS suffer from a new infectious disease. It is different from anything known to have ever struck humanity. All indications are that it did not exist before the 1970s. In the 1980s, it has become epidemic. It is almost always fatal, and there is no cure. This is the agent which causes AIDS, a virus magnified here 250,000 times. To infect a victim, the virus must enter the bloodstream. Most of the blood is made of red cells which transport oxygen, but there are also white blood cells called lymphocytes. Lymphocytes, these pictures show them magnified thousands of times, are the body's main weapons to fight disease. These lymphocytes are what the AIDS virus destroys. The AIDS victim is then unable to resist infections. Homosexual men with AIDS often develop a rare form of cancer called Kaposi sarcoma. It causes these blotches on the skin. Homosexuals and other AIDS victims also catch a rare pneumonia caused by the pneumocystis bacterium. That is the most common cause of death among AIDS patients in the United States. But AIDS victims are susceptible to many other infections. In the parts of Africa where AIDS is common, the victims often develop malaria or tuberculosis. Doctors treat AIDS patients by trying to cure the pneumonia, cancer, or other secondary infections they develop. But so far, these treatments have done little to prolong the patients' lives.
Over the past 4 years, despite the fact that we're able to diagnose things earlier, we haven't really been able to impact on the average lifespan after diagnosis in patients with AIDS.
Several research groups are trying to develop a vaccine that would prevent infection with the AIDS virus. Others are trying several experimental drugs in the hope that one will eliminate the virus in people who are already infected. So far, nothing has worked. Today, a group of French physicians announced that 2 of the patients they had treated with the drug cyclosporin had died. On October 29th, those doctors called a news conference to announce that after a week's treatment, those patients had shown a dramatic improvement.
So, Tom, one of the things we in the news business have to be very careful about is false hopes. Incidents like that indicate how eager many people are to find a cure and to announce that there is one before, in fact, they found anything at all.
And the fact is that this virus is mutating now. It's spreading and breaking up and changing and getting ahead of the curve, isn't it?
Well, that's been one of the, I don't know if it's getting ahead of the curve, but one of the things about this virus is from many different samples, when they look at the DNA, the genetic material, it's different. So the virus is changing, and that makes finding a vaccine very much more difficult.
Dr. Anthony Fauci runs the government's AIDS research program at the National Institutes of Health. He's in Boston tonight. Dr. Fauci, we know what the virus is and what it does. Why is it so difficult to find a defense against it?
Well, the reason it's so difficult to find a defense against it is, as you've heard, the virus has the capability of attacking the very cells that normally would protect you against any type of a viral illness. For example, if you had a virus that wasn't the AIDS virus, influenza or another virus like that, your immune system would react against it and ultimately suppress the virus. In this situation, you have a double jeopardy of being infected with the virus, but what the virus is doing is destroying the very defenses that would normally clear it or ultimately protect you against it.
Do we have enough money working on this problem at this time?
At the present time, with the money that's now become available, we have enough money to go after this and to attack the problems which are ahead of us.
Dr. Fauci, your colleague at the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Robert Gallo, has said that he expects a vaccine to be developed within a year and clinical trials to take about another year. Do you think that's overly optimistic?
Well, no, actually not. The virus is in hand. It's been purified, it's been cloned, its components are known. The real major question that is eluding us right now is just what is the body's mechanism of defending itself against this virus. So I'm sure that we could have material, viral material, that we can inject into individuals and get an immune response. The critical question is, will that immune response be adequate to protect the individuals who are vaccinated against the virus? And we don't know that now. If indeed it is capable of being of that occurring, then that is not so far-fetched a prediction of having a virus during that a vaccine during that period of time.
Dr. Fauci, can we write off this business in Paris about using cyclosporine as a drug?
Well, I think in any therapeutic approach towards this virus, you really have to have a considerable amount of time to test and see if, in fact, you're having a beneficial effect with the agent. The announcement of a dramatic breakthrough, I think, was entirely premature on their part, and I don't think we can look towards that drug right now for any great breakthrough.
Dr. Fauci, Bob Bazell, we're going to move on here if we can.
Okay, one last quick question. Is it possible that because this is such a new virus that it will be impossible to make a vaccine?
It is conceivable that it would be impossible to make a vaccine. However, given the fact that we are now starting to determine the immunological mechanisms which might defend against the virus, I would think that it would be more feasible that we would be able to, although it is possible that we will not be able to.
Dr. Fauci, Bob, thank you very much. It's a good, important last question. Of course, the risk of getting AIDS, even though small, has some Americans playing it very carefully where they work. In our poll, 19%, that's 1 in 5 of those surveyed, those who are currently employed say that they have taken some precautions against exposure to AIDS at the office or at the store. 81%, on the other hand, see no need to change their habits or their associations, at work at least. Can AIDS be controlled? Well, like anything else in science, there are no guarantees. AIDS is a graphic reminder that most of the time we actually rely on reasonable medical judgments and probabilities. Dr. Paul Volberding makes those judgments every day. He runs the AIDS program at San Francisco General Hospital. Dr. Volberding, do you believe that AIDS will be confined to this present high-risk group that we now identify?
That's obviously an important question that we're all asking ourselves. I think the evidence now in the United States is that AIDS is remaining confined to the same risk groups. The